This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm George Thomas. Ongoing unrest in Portland, Oregon. The head of the police union there is accusing city leaders of allowing the city to be destroyed as violent protests are in their 7th week. Dale Hurd has the story.
2 straight months of rioting in Portland. But judging from his comments to the media, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler's chief concern is not the destruction of his city, but the presence of federal officers in Portland trying to stop the chaos. Portland police declared a riot Saturday night after hundreds of demonstrators broke into the Portland Police Association building and set it on fire. Protesters were chanting, "Every city, every town, burn the precincts to the ground." But with increasing violence and damage now in the millions, what Portland's mayor wants is for federal law enforcement officers who are in the city to protect federal property to go away. He's accusing them of violating protesters' civil rights.
Leave. Your presence here isn't wanted. It's not needed. Unmarked vehicles driving into crowds, pulling people off the streets without any probable cause, as far as I can tell. And the people who are engaging in those activities aren't even willing to identify who they are, and they don't wear insignia on their uniforms. That's a real threat to democracy.
In a tweet, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the federal officers stormtroopers. But on Fox News Sunday, President Trump defended federal involvement.
If you look at what's gone on in Portland, those are anarchists, and we've taken a very tough stand. If we didn't take a stand in Portland, we've arrested many of these leaders. If we didn't take that stand, right now you would have a problem like, they were going to lose Portland.
There were also continuing violent protests in Seattle and Chicago, where Black Lives Matter protesters pelted police with projectiles. Former 60s radical David Horowitz accuses Democratic leaders of helping what he calls terrorists.
Why is half the country torn up? Because Democrats are aiding and abetting terrorists. What else can you call these people in the streets destroying everything, beating up people? They're terrorists, and the Democrat Party is in bed with them.
And the head of Portland's police union accuses city leaders of condoning the chaos.
This is no longer about George Floyd. This is no longer about racial equity. This is about violence, rioting, destruction.
But incredibly, Oregon's Attorney General is seeking a court order to stop federal agents from arresting rioters in Portland. And 3 House Democratic chairs are calling for an investigation of federal involvement. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thank you, Dale. Meanwhile, Prager University is hoping to bring communities together in a show of support for police. Today, they launched their new Back the Blue campaign, a nationwide initiative to spread messages of gratitude and appreciation for law enforcement. Joining us now from Prager University is Will Witt. Will, thank you so much for coming on the show. So what is your reaction to what's been happening in Portland and other cities with ongoing riots? Was it situations like this that inspired you to Back the Blue initiative?
Yeah, I think what's going on is a terrible thing. I heard on that video before, the guy said that it's not about George Floyd anymore, and it's really not. Of course, that the police officer who murdered George Floyd should be held accountable for his actions, but most police officers, the vast majority, are good cops who are risking their lives every day to defend us. So with what's been going on in the media, these protesters, the radical left out in the streets trying to defund the police, we decided at PragerU that it was time to defend the police and back the blue. So that's why we started this campaign.
What about those who say major police reform is needed?
If there's major police reform needed, those are things that are really held up to the city councils of these different communities. We're seeing it in Minneapolis. We're seeing it in different places across the country. But as we're seeing that in places where they are, police presence is diminishing, like in New York, where they cut that anti-crime unit, crime is going up. So murders are going up, violent crime is going up in all these places where we're seeing the police being defunded. So this police reform doesn't seem to be doing the job that the left is actually claiming it would do.
Yeah. Will, what are ways your group and others can support police reform while also standing for public safety, law and order, and respecting officers?
Well, I think we can always look and say, police officers can always use more training. I think myself that police officers are trained very well. They're not trained to be racist. They're trained to de-escalate situations. But of course, there can always be more training that can be done. But police need to be heralded as heroes in our communities. If you make them feel terrible, who's going to want to be a police officer? Then the only people who are going to come and become police officers are going to be the bottom of the barrel type of people with no other options in America. You want to make them feel proud of their job, proud of their position, so that we get the best of the best.
How can people participate in the Back the Blue campaign?
Well, the first thing you can do is go to PragerU.com and sign our thank you letter to police officers. Second thing, you can post our PragerU pro-police content all over your social media. And you can also make a message of gratitude to the police and post it on your social media, tagging PragerU. And we're doing a lot to try and defend the police. And I hope that you guys all join us with the hashtag #BackTheBlue today and all this week.
All right, terrific. We'll have to leave it there. Well, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast. Now to the latest on the you're welcome. To the latest on the coronavirus crisis. The U.S. now reporting nearly 3.8 million cases, with many of America's hotspots still struggling to contain the virus. Texas is one of the 8 states setting new records for daily deaths. Officials there bringing in refrigerated mobile morgues as hospitals are becoming overrun. In Florida, 12,400 new cases on Sunday, one of its highest daily totals, and less than 20% of ICU beds are available nationwide. Meanwhile, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti admitting his state probably opened too soon and warning of a likely second shutdown.
I think we're on the brink of that. We have to be as vigilant right now as we were the first day.
But good news, potentially promising early results from Oxford University's COVID vaccine test showing a positive immune response in phase 1 and phase 2 of its initial trial. China still faces, one other note. Be sure to tune into Faith Nation for the very latest on this issue as our nation's capital on other potential relief package as COVID-19 shows no signs of going away. As always, you can watch it right here on the CBN News Channel. Overseas, China still faces global criticism for its mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis. Now, some say the Chinese Communist Party is using the pandemic as an excuse for targeting Christians.
Now, under this pretext of COVID-19 coronavirus, the Chinese Communist Party has intensified its persecution by banning all the church activities, even those services or worship or prayer meetings in believers' own homes with their own family members.
The government also arresting Christians who called for online prayer meetings. And earlier this month, more than 100 Public Security Bureau police and others were sent to oversee the demolition of crosses at more churches in China's Xinjiang province. Security guards reportedly beat Christians who tried to stop the cross removals. Chinese police are also interrupting services and arresting church leaders. Here to talk more about what's going on in China's church crackdown is senior international correspondent Gary Lane. Gary, Christians say it is the worst persecution that they have seen since Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Tell us, when did this latest wave of persecution begin?
Well, of course, it didn't start with COVID-19, as you know. Yeah. That's just the excuse now, as we mentioned. But, George, this started back in 2015, and if you recall, I know you reported about it, I did too, the removal of crosses from atop churches, mostly in Xinjiang province. Hundreds of them were removed, and then raids on churches. And you know, back in 2018, you reported this, Wang Yi. Wang Yi was the head pastor of the Early Rain Covenant Church. On December 9th, 2018, he was arrested, and along with about 100 members of his church, the leadership there, most of them have been released now, but he received 9 years in prison simply for leading an unregistered church. The church was growing, and that's what the communists were worried about. But we still don't know where he is or what's happened to him. That's recent examples.
You talked about the crosses, but can you talk about more recent examples of this latest crackdown against Christians?
Well, we mentioned the two churches in Xinjiang province. We had two of them on July 7th. where crosses were removed from the top of their buildings. The Christians come out to protest. They get beaten. And an 80-year-old man, George, was violently shoved to the ground, an 80-year-old man. Also on July 5th, raids of another church in Guilin. And some of the believers there stood out in front of the Public Security Bureau office and started singing hymns as they awaited the release of some of their leaders. But this is ongoing.
Yeah. And you talk about some of these individuals. Are they actually being arrested and charged and sentenced to prison for a certain period of time?
Well, they're charged. Yeah. Now, whether they're sentenced to prison, they have to wait until their trial. But what is happening, George, this is all part of Sinicization, which is, in other words, it is China saying this is a new policy whereby to be a good citizen of China, you must be faithful. You must show fidelity to the Communist Party and to our leaders, to our nation. You do that by putting up posters or portraits of our leaders. Here's a church where you don't see a cross there, but you see Mao, and next to him is Xi Jinping, the president for life. No cross in that church. Also on the sides of the churches, things like propaganda posters and sayings, rather than quotes from Jesus and the Bible. And this is happening to individuals in their homes as well.
Obviously very familiar to what's, similar to what's happening in North Korea.
Yes.
With the leaders of the Kim dynasty and so forth.
Almost like a cult following.
Exactly. I'm curious, what can we in the United States do? What can the President of the United States do?
Well, there isn't a lot you can do, but, the President and Congress have enacted the Hong Kong Autonomy Act. In addition to that, for the Uyghur Muslims, the Uyghur Human Rights Act, those things can punish the Chinese and individuals who are involved in violating human rights of the people. But Christians say we need something like that. Well, there is the International Religious Freedom Act, which grants the President and members of Congress the authority to enact legislation that would punish individuals who violate human rights. Beyond that, George, I would say pray. We as believers need to pray for the Christians like Pastor Wang Yi. Nobody knows where he is. He's suffering in prison. Also, pray for revival in China.
All right, terrific. Gary, as always, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast. Coming up, one Christian photographer and blogger takes action when it comes to protecting his beliefs and his business. But before we go to the break, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNewsNow.com.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to the broadcast. You are watching the CBN News Channel. A Virginia photographer and blogger is suing the state over a new law that he believes threatens his freedom of religion and his business. It all centers around the Virginia Values Act. Faithwire.com Trey Goins-Phillips is here to tell us more about this. So, Trey, thank you for coming on the show. What is the Virginia Values Act and what it does?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So the Virginia Values Act is really, it codifies an additional class of people who are protected from discrimination. And, instead of just male, female, black, white, Hispanic, it adds now sexual orientation and gender identity as a governmentally protected class from any sort of discrimination, whether that be in employment or in housing or in public spaces, or public or private. They're now considered a protected group.
Chris Herring, the photographer and blogger, is being represented by Alliance Defending Freedom. What are they saying about this law and the case?
So the concern for Chris, as a photographer who's also a Christian, is that this law would make it easier, essentially, for individuals and for the state to file lawsuits against any sort of organization, Christian or otherwise, that doesn't, for example, he's a photographer who refuses to do photography for a gay wedding, a same-sex marriage, because that goes against his conviction. And the concern in his lawsuit is that they could essentially discriminate and really fine a Christian organization out of business.
And to this point, could he and other Christian business owners be fined out of business?
Yeah, that's actually is a top concern for Chris, and it's also the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the organization representing him. They're concerned that could happen in other cases. They see this as really could be punitive toward Christian organizations, because Chris has made clear that he serves people regardless of their sexual orientation. There are just certain events, certain instances, like a same-sex wedding, that he won't do because of his convictions. And he fears that could be used, that this act could be used against him, that he could be tied up in litigation, he could be buried in fines for every day that he refuses to photograph a same-sex wedding, for example.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Chris is being represented by Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm curious, are they arguing that such a law goes against constitutional freedoms of speech and religion?
Yeah, they are. They see this as 100% a threat to religious liberty, because Chris, like many others, I'm sure, has said as a Christian, he also wouldn't do things that promote pornography or that promote abuse. So he's saying that, or promote alcoholism. He said, so it's not like I'm just picking one thing and saying I'm against it. If it goes against Christian orthodoxy, he's opposed to it. And they definitely see this as something that infringes on the right to religious liberty that are guaranteed in our Constitution.
All right, terrific. Trey, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast. Trey Goins-Phillips with Faithwire.com. By the way, you can hear more on today's important spiritual and cultural issues. You can catch it on Faithwire's Faith versus Culture tonight at 9:30 Eastern, right here on the CBN News Channel. After the break, how CBN's Operation Blessing is helping families struggling to survive in the Philippines.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
And welcome back to the CBN News Channel. We head overseas where the iconic jeepneys that usually run through the city and streets of the Philippines are sitting idle because passengers, as you can imagine, are staying home in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. However, the drivers, sometimes along with their children, are still on the streets, begging for food and help. CBN's Lucille Talusan reports from Manila on how Operation Blessing is helping them in their struggle to survive.
While other kids are in the comfort of their homes during the COVID-19 pandemic, 11-year-old Cedi Sebastian is out in the streets begging for money to buy food.
I pity my father because he cannot work. We don't have food to eat. That's why I begged so we can have money to buy rice, food, and milk for my sister.
Cedi's father is among the thousands of jeepney drivers who are struggling financially after they lost their jobs when the Philippine government imposed a coronavirus lockdown in March.
It hurts to see my son begging, but I can't stop him. He tells me just to stand nearby so I can quickly come to him when the policeman tries to arrest him.
Although some routes have recently been opened, allowing 6,000 drivers to operate, this is only a small fraction of the more than 50,000 jeepneys that used to fill the streets of Metro Manila.
I have to keep my face mask on so that I will not get fined for $100. Behind me are the jobless jeepney drivers, and they have resorted to begging for food and money out here in the streets. Most of them have been evicted from their rented places because they don't have money to pay the rent. So now they have to endure the discomforts of living in the jeepney as their home.
We live here since the lockdown. It's very difficult, especially for our children. There's a lot of mosquitoes and it's very hot. I appeal to the authorities to open our routes so we can earn again because it's been 4 months now that we don't have income.
Like the rest of the drivers, Nilo Malibiran is frustrated over his family's miserable condition.
It is making me cry to see my family suffer. I want to buy them many things, but I don't have money. Our son got sick and I don't have money to buy his medicines and buy him milk. It's so frustrating.
To alleviate their suffering, Operation Blessing reached out to the jeepney drivers and gave them food bags that contained rice, canned goods, noodles, cereal, coffee, and other basic needs.
Thank you for everything you gave us. This is really a big help because we can't buy those things.
I am very happy with everything that Operation Blessing has given us. It's a lot. Now we have plenty of food to eat. I don't have to beg. Thank you so much.
A volunteer pastor of Operation Blessing gathered the jeepney drivers to share with them the message of salvation through Christ. He prayed for their faith to be strengthened as they wait for the day that they can drive their jeepneys in the streets again. Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Manila.
Up next, an Ohio couple who thought they'd never have a baby of their own. They just celebrated the birth of their son. How their journey to parenthood was unique.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5.
Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Well, our next story is pretty amazing. 4 years after going through a uterine transplant, a woman in Ohio is celebrating the birth of her son. 31-year-old Michelle was born with a rare condition that left her without a uterus. Thinking she would never carry her own child, Michelle and her husband considered adoption. But one day, a Facebook post about a uterus transplant, well, that took them down a different road. She went through an in-depth screening process and later a successful 14-hour uterus transplant at Cleveland Clinic. Her recovery took about 6 months, but a team of caregivers from more than 12 specialties helped prepare her for the big day, which finally came true over the weekend with the birth of their baby boy. Both parents expressing their gratitude for their amazing journey.
I didn't start to feel him kick until like 27 weeks. That was one thing like I wanted to feel and see was him moving. To know somebody else's uterus helped me achieve him, and to hold him was like the best thing in the world.
Oh, and the baby's boy's name? Cole. And he spent a week in the NICU before going home in March. Well, folks, that's it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. From the Christian Broadcasting Network, headquarters here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It is a scorcher out there. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye and God bless.